Today I'm playing Twinkle Twinkle Little Stars.
That was adorable. Anyways, hi, welcome to Children's Advocacy Week. Bit different, but it's a lot of fun already. I'm here with the Face It Youth Ambassadors, and my name is Felicity Therese Kruger. I'm 17, and I'm gonna do a snazzy little speech. So that's exciting. This is actually my 5th year going to Children's Advocacy Day. I have been going since I was 12 years old, so it's pretty exciting for me to be on here doing a speech. I am incredibly honored. So I remember my first experience coming to Children's Advocacy Day. I was 12. Me and my mom had just walked into the rotunda, and I could see tons of people. It was insane how many people were down here in Frankfurt at the Capitol, passionate about helping youth. And every year I could sort of see that passion grow and get brighter. And this year is just another year where it's just getting brighter. I go with my mom every year. She's out in the other room listening to this. She is the first person who got me involved in advocacy. She has been an advocate for kids for as long as I can remember, and someone I look up to very much. Like her, I hope to grow up and be a social worker and a foster mom and pass down this advocacy and love for others and passion. I followed my mom around the state as she was making changes for youth because she had this drive for her kids. I followed her and I saw what was going on in the state. I saw changes and I saw things that kids were going through, kids my age, and I got involved. It started with Children's Advocacy Day, which got me involved in so many other things, like Face It Youth Ambassadors, that I'm here today with. I'm very hopeful for a future that is one with kids who always have someone looking up for them. So I am going to share my story in hopes that it might help at least one of them. So I was one of the lucky ones, but it wasn't always lucky. CPS first intervened in the abusive home I was in when I was a month old. After that, I spent most of my life bouncing around between foster homes, biological parents, and eventually ending up in my forever home at 2.5. Now, most people look at that and think of how lucky I am, and I am extremely lucky. And most people think that none of that trauma would affect me. But I grew up with that trauma. I was young, but it still followed me around my whole life. I grew up with the story of a toddler terrified of boxes and water. Usually, you get a toddler toy and they play with the box. Not me. I screamed until the box left the room. Pretty weird for a toddler. But that wasn't all. For as long as I can remember, I would be fearful if I heard yelling or loud bangs, and a constant worry of being abandoned. I remember at 5 years old waking up crying because of a dream that my parents left, till I walked downstairs and saw my mom making pancakes. I couldn't understand why I felt these things. I started hearing more in depth about what happened to me, piecing together everything that I went through when I was only a baby. me and my mom would have a conversation when I was about 13 after I expressed to her what I was feeling. During that conversation was when I first heard the words pre-verbal trauma. Pre-verbal trauma is trauma that affects you before you can speak. It can be as early as being in the womb or as late as 3 years old. Before you're 3, you form basic skills, talking, walking. You figure out your love map, which is really created by your parents and the way they treat you. A lot of people believe that being young means you wouldn't remember a thing, but I did. So I knew what a kid going through the pain of trauma looked like. I started to identify with the youth around me who were going through trauma as I grew older, and I started working with youth. At a summer camp called Bear Creek, which is, the poster is right there, was one of the places I grew up to continue to grow my passion for helping youth who just want someone to stand up for them. I'd gone to that summer camp since I was a little girl, only about 7. I lost my spot. I looked up to the many counselors there, and I wanted to be just like them. So eventually, I became a role model for the other kids. I would be a listening ear and a shoulder to cry on, just like the counselors there would be. And I'll always say I learned from the best. But with the good can always come the bad. I remember a few summers ago, I went to a summer camp called Sequoia. I saw kids who were dealing with an existential amount of problems and trauma. I also saw adults who didn't care, who categorized them as difficult kids or looking for attention. That's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about the changes that the Blueprints for Kentucky's Children is trying to make. With the Blueprint priorities, with advocating for these priorities, such as modifying the mandated child abuse reporting law to disallow the chain of command procedures within the public and private agencies, you can help end this awful cycle of abuse and be a part of a solution. I've been on both sides, and let me tell you that the ones who root for kids will always be on top. Please remember to stand up for every kid, the lucky, the unlucky, the happy, and the sad. You never know what one child is going through, so stand up for them all, no matter what. Thank you. And then I am going to welcome Terry Brooks. So everybody virtually clap for him.
Hey, I think we should all be virtually clapping for Felicity. I saw all the comments about how much courage, bravery, and guts it takes to tell that kind of story. And Felicity, you already have made today's rally a raging success. So I know folks in your life have to be so proud of you. Folks in Adair County have to be so happy that you're an Adair Countian. And we're just lucky to have you as a Kentuckian. So thank you so much for sharing your heart and your life with us. It humbles me, and my guess is it humbles everybody watching you this morning. Thank you so much for being here. So Felicity has really done my job. So I'm kind of saying, see y'all. But she outlined what this day, what this rally, what this week, what our efforts in Frankfort are all about. Can we really make Kentucky the best place in America to be young? In my head, the answer to that is a definitive yes. In fact, we can aspire to do nothing less. And we so appreciate all of you who are joining us today. From a preliminary analysis, it looks like we actually have more folks registered for this virtual effort than we typically have at the Capitol. And if you've been there, you know that scene. 3 levels in the rotunda, in the second floor, the mezzanine, the 3rd floor are all packed. So get your virtual head around that scene, and that's what we have going this morning. And it's so important that, especially perhaps this year, that we intentionally take some time this morning to pause and really understand what's at stake, what's going on, what are the potential wins that Kentucky's kids have. I do want to take just a moment and very publicly thank our sponsors. I hope that you will do more than just glance at the slides on the scene. I hope that you actually will really look at them, and if you have connections, reach out and thank them. I'd like to single out 3 groups who are especially important. Cosair Charities for their omnibus work in kids policy and programming, and that certainly animates the blueprint. The Face It campaign, that shirt that Felicity was wearing, is possible only through the charities. Aetna Health has stepped up big time, and they are the sponsor of Children's Advocacy Week. As I hope many of you know, we have almost 24 events this week, interviews, forums, special events. None of that would be possible without the good folks at Aetna supporting us. And finally, when you talk about policy proposals on the blueprint, such as the one that Felicity mentioned, probably you're going to hear that from legislators and the governor later today, those discrete policies. As you know, blueprint policies are not ideological. They're research and data based. The work that we do around data with Kids Count would not be possible without the signature sponsorship of the Passport Plan by Molina Healthcare. So the charities, Aetna, Passport by Molina, as well as all those other sponsors on the screen, they're the ones who make that possible. So the purpose of today is to A, give you a good landscape in Frankfort, B, express public appreciation for Frankfort leaders who delivered for kids during 2020. And then we want to get you ramped up as the General Assembly reconvenes today. We want to get you ramped up to be an active voice for kids. I don't know about you, but if I were to simply watch the narrative that's playing out publicly, one could think that the bifurcation, toxicity, and polarization in Frankfort and perhaps in Washington mean that nothing is going to get done. You need to hear that I think we absolutely reject that hypothesis. I'm somebody who does believe that there can be honorable disagreement between legislators, between the executive branch and the legislative branch, whether that's in Washington or in Frankfort. There can be honorable disagreements. But the imperative for every elected leader is to also find common ground. Common ground where agreement and consensus and action can be reached. It's what I call principled pragmatism or pragmatic principles. And we have 2 leaders who are going to talk to you today who exemplify that kind of attitude. Do they stand up for their values and ideas? Absolutely. But do they work to make genuine change? Do they work to be catalyst when it comes to progress for kids? Absolutely. So we're so pleased to have Senator Julie Raque Adams representing the Senate. And then you're going to hear a message from Speaker of the House, David Osborne. Both of those folks are real champions for kids. I have to tell you, Senator, that I am so relieved. I almost wore a shirt that was, I think, pretty darn close to your blouse. And I'm already accused of kind of being president of the JRA fan club. I'm fearful that if we dressed alike, I'd be in real trouble. So you know that we appreciate what you do every session and every day for kids. We so appreciate you joining us. It's an honor to have you with us today. So give the word to the folks.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm really excited to be invited to this year's rally for Kentucky Kids. It's hard to believe that this is the 17th annual Children's Advocacy Week in Frankfurt. You've been doing a great job, Terry, and your organization is fantastic. So we gather online today to make a difference for Kentucky's kids. Although lawmakers can have different priorities and interests, children have a way of bringing us all together. So I see through my work on the Senate Health and Welfare Committee, that committee assignment has given me really a front row seat to all of your advocacy efforts. And those efforts have led to many victories over the last few years. The General Assembly has made strides in recent years to curb tobacco use among our youth. I've had a hand in lawmakers crossing the aisle to establish a statewide tobacco-free school campus policy and increase tobacco excise taxes and set the legal minimum age for purchasing of tobacco products at 21. In 2018, lawmakers addressed child marriage by passing legislation. I introduced that, and it prohibited anyone from under 17 from getting married. Also that year, the legislature passed what became known as the Dignity Bill, and it outlawed the shackling of moms giving birth behind bars. So these victories were only possible because Republicans and Democrats came and found common ground when it comes to kids. Even the most divergent political ideologies agree that these core values we should teach our kids are responsibility, hard work, and kindness and good manners. And this is all according to a survey released a few years ago. Responsibility was the greatest common denominator between respondents when it came to child rearing, no matter what part of the political spectrum they chose. While people's political philosophies may take them in all different directions, this survey showed that everyone comes together on common ground when it comes to concern for our kids. So once again, this session, let's recognize that children are our common ground to cross the aisle, and our children's future depends on crossing the aisle. So we must come together. Lawmakers must also find common ground, in my opinion, to pass Senate Bill 81, which I introduced. It would allow local governments the option to quickly and effectively regulate the use, display, sale, and distribution of tobacco products. City and county governments can respond more quickly to local needs, tailor their ordinances to meet those needs, and develop effective enforcement mechanisms. So I think this bill is critical. More than a third of Kentucky's middle and high schoolers believe that the COVID-19 pandemic has increased student usage of vapes as well as other tobacco products. And that's according to a recent survey by the Kentucky Youth Advocates in partnership with the Foundation for a Healthy Kentucky. So this survey result was so alarming because youth who vape are 7 times more likely to catch COVID-19. So lawmakers must also find common ground to pass Senate Bill 77, which I crossed the aisle to jointly sponsor with Senator Gerald Neal. It would require greater minority representation on superintendent screening committees in school districts with minority student populations of 50% or greater. So lawmakers must find common ground to strengthen the Dignity Bill of 2018. So I introduced this session Senate Bill 84, I call it Dignity 2, and it would ensure that incarcerated women 6 weeks of postpartum care. It would end the solitary confinement during and after their pregnancies, and it would expand medical release program for substance use disorders and increase access to social workers. One of the things that we talk about all the time is reconnecting that family. And so if we can help people get the treatment that they need, they can reconnect with their families. This really matters to our kids. Kentucky has the second highest rate of kids with an incarcerated parent. I also introduced Senate Resolution 34, which would make a flag recently created by more than 100 mental health organizations the official Kentucky mental health flag. The goal is to create a recognizable and positive symbol to undo the stigma associated with mental health. And that's important because less than 20% of children with diagnosable mental health problems ever get the treatment that they need. And it's estimated that it is often a 10-year gap between the onset of symptoms of mental illness and a proper diagnosis for kids. So early treatment can help prevent addiction and suicide. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among individuals between the ages of 10 and 34. We are gathered online today to get those important pieces of legislation passed this session, and we need to continue to raise our voices on behalf of children's safety, health, education, and economic well-being. So it was really an honor to be with you all today, and I promise to continue to dedicate my public service to ensuring Kentucky's kids' future.
Thank you for inviting me to join you today. Before I begin, I want to recognize Kentucky youth advocates and the many individuals and organizations that are watching. I would also like to take a moment and share something that I think we all need to hear. Better times are ahead. I know that may be hard to believe as our state faces so many COVID-related challenges, but it's true. Children will return to school, we will all go back to work, and we will be able to visit with friends and family without worrying. Our state and nation have endured greater challenges, and we've emerged stronger because of them. We will this time too. I think kids need to hear this. The childhood mental health issues growing at a rapid pace as everything they know changes. They're falling further behind in learning, unable to participate in the activities that help them develop, and often surrounded by adults who are trying to balance too many things. As I hope you know, the House is committed to putting Kentucky families first and making our Commonwealth the best place to live and work, and also making it the best place to be a kid. This goal dovetails quite well with KYA's mission. I always look forward to KYA's annual day at the Capitol, and while this year looks a lot different, we remain committed to working with you and other organizations to help Kentucky's children. In fact, I think our work is more important now than ever. While we know the pandemic and the state's response to it have impacted everyone, they haven't had the same effect on all of us. For those living in poverty, basic needs like food and education are further out of reach. For the thousands of children living in state care, permanent families are further away, and even parent visitations were unnecessarily halted. For those dealing with physical, mental, or emotional challenges, specialized care is harder to access. Already this session, after the work of both the Speaker Pro Tem and Representative Jennifer Decker, we have passed legislation that prevents court-ordered visitation from being interrupted by an executive order and gives our schools a pathway to safely reopening. We will convene the second part of this year's session later today. At the top of our agenda is passing a responsible one-year state spending plan that helps see our state through these uncertain times. We will also consider a proposal that builds on landmark child welfare legislation sponsored by Representative Meade and Minority Leader Jenkins. Before I close, please know that our door is always open. We are always willing to talk constructively about what we can do to improve the lives of our young people. Our policies are stronger and our Commonwealth is better for the work that you do, and we thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Raque Adams, and thank you so much, Speaker Osborne. Again, I hope what you heard during those two reflections is real hope and real challenge that we can make a difference for kids in Frankfort this year. One of the things that I personally don't think folks do enough is to say thank you. Thank you to leaders who step up on all kinds of issues. And typically we would have several leaders behind me in Frankfort, and we'd be calling them up and giving them an award. We can't do that today, so we're going to do it in a virtual way. The first recognition that I want to give is to a collection of folks. You know, I think we all realize that by the Constitution, the federal government really only has two assigned responsibilities. The responsibility to wage war to protect this nation, and the responsibility to conduct a census every 10 years. Well, you know, 2020 was that census year, and what a challenge that was. We began in 2018, actually, banging the drum about the importance of the census. We know that Kentucky had an unacceptable level of folks not counted in 2010, especially the number of children, especially the number of young children, especially the number of young children of color and poverty. That's so vital. because literally hundreds of programs ranging from school nutrition to childcare to K-12 funding is totally dependent upon federal funding that's based upon the census. So a number of folks stepped up and initiated a complete count effort across the Commonwealth. I'd like to begin by thanking both former Governor Bevin and Governor Beshear. Yes, Governor Bevin and Governor Beshear both were absolutely committed to making sure that Kentucky received a complete count. Thank you to both of those folks. We also want to especially recognize Lieutenant Governor Coleman, Senate President Stivers, Senate Minority Leader Morgan McGarvey, Representative Atticus Scott played a key role in the complete count census effort this past year. There were a number of not elected folks. I would especially recognize Secretary Eric Friedlander. And then frankly, the real load was lifted by staffers of both past and current governor's offices. Dustin Isaacs, John Park, Carrie Banahan, Karen Cantrell, and Kinsey Morrison were all part of making sure that every kid was counted in this 2020 census. That's going to positively impact Kentucky and especially our children for the next decade. So thanks to all of you who were really part of that 2020 census team. Way to go. As Senator Raque Adams mentioned, there has been real progress last year when it comes to kids. I think that one of the things that you know about KYA is that at least I'm not smart enough to figure out how kids grow up in silos. We believe that kids' economic status impact their educational achievement. We believe that kids' economic status impacts their health outcomes, and health outcomes impact safety. So we need a full-on offense when it comes to a range of issues with kids. 2020 gave legislators every excuse in the world to cop out, didn't it? I mean, the pandemic, and we can't meet, and we're interrupted, and yet children's champions persevered and made real differences when it came to kids. I'd like to start by thinking about something that Senator Raque Adams has already alluded to. That is, there is a real push in Frankfort to protect kids from tobacco products and that rising epidemic of vaping. Senator Alvarado, Representative Miller, Representative Mosher, Senator Raque Adams, all were vital parts of protecting kids from the hazards of tobacco and e-cigarettes. Also would have to give a shout out, not as an elected leader, but Ben Chandler and the Foundation for Healthy Kentucky was a backbone in pushing these measures through. So in Kentucky, it's tough to take on tobacco. And we're learning that because of very well-heeled funding, it's tough to take on e-cig companies. Those representatives and those senators had the smarts and the backbone to do exactly that. Way to go. Again, Senator Raque Adams referenced, as did Speaker Osborne, an arena where we have seen so much progress. Felicity also alluded to that, and that's the whole area of child welfare. It is an area of common ground between the Bevin and Beshear administration. It's a common ground between the House and the Senate, and real progress was made this past year around that. Senator Alvarado sponsored an important piece of legislation around closing background checks. Additionally, we would call out Representative Mosher for her work. We would call out Senator Raque Adams for the good work she did around foster care transition efforts. Representative Jenkins, Representative Mead, Representative Beckler were all part of fundamental, transformational child welfare reform. So thanks to those representatives, those senators, again, we would send a special thanks not to an elected representative, but we have found that Secretary Friedlander and his team have been very supportive of those common ground efforts, and we appreciate all of that work. I already referenced that great t-shirt that Felicity was wearing around the Face It campaign. We know that child abuse continues to plague Kentucky. We have the highest rate in the nation. The General Assembly is not sitting on its hands. They're taking real steps to make a difference when it comes to preventing abuse and maltreatment from our kids. Special recognition would go to Representative Beckler for his work in limiting timeframes around cases of child sexual abuse. I also want to thank Representative Riley, who made such an effort to end corporal punishment. We have often said that it's only in North Korea, Cuba, and Kentucky where kids can get hit by inanimate objects in school. Representative Riley really tried to push that. That is still on the docket this year. And we thank him, as well as folks like, frankly, Senator Raque Adams, who did so much backdrop work for us on that issue. So thank Senator Raque Adams, Representative Riley, and Representative Beckler for their good work around that. Juvenile justice is an issue that always needs work, and a persistent voice pushing that agenda is Senate Judiciary Chair Whitney Westerfield. Last year, Senator Westerfield again worked through Senate Bill 87 to end the mandatory transfer of youth to adult court for certain offenses. We have an important agenda for juvenile justice this year. We're counting again on bipartisan support to make that a reality. The other area that we can't ignore is the whole area of what I would call learning environments. We want to thank Representative Prunty for strengthening licensing around childcare. That particular measure really tackled things like healthy eating, physical activity, minimizing screen time for our youngest kids. Way to go, Representative Prunty. We also appreciated the really strong intellectual work that Senator Givens and his team put in to strengthen accountability and assessment systems for our K-12 students. Additionally, Senator McDaniel, as chair of the Senate Budget Committee, gets a special shout out because he was the guy who really fought to put dollars around expanded care, which really provides mental and behavioral health services directly to the K-12 community in a way where we get an incredibly positive federal match. Currently, what I love is that voices like Senator McDaniels and Lieutenant Governor Coleman have joined together to make that push. And so again, in an environment where you hear so much about what can't get done in Frankfort, at a time when we hear so much about those folks can't agree on anything, when it comes to kids, that hypothesis is not accurate. Whether it was the census effort or whether it was those discrete pieces of legislation, we know that kids are a common ground for Kentucky. So thank you so much. Well, this morning, you have heard from Senate leadership. You heard from Speaker of the House, Osborne, and now we get to hear from the governor. Governor, welcome. We're so happy to have you. I remember probably 7 years ago that we had asked a person named Lieutenant Governor Crit Llewellyn to do just a small favor for us. We wanted her to take a couple hundred kids and entertain them during lunch. And she mentioned to me that she was going to bring a partner. I think he was some guy running for AG primary race named Andy Beshear, who showed up. And, you know, I was over there at the education center, and that guy did pretty well with those kids. Then what I appreciate is that during your time as Attorney General, you did not necessarily want the spotlight, but instead you spent Children's Advocacy Day meeting with kids who had suffered abuse and neglect and just talked to them. That was such a powerful, powerful testament to your commitment. And so whether it was your appearance last year at the rally, today, or those past events, we appreciate it. And, you know, Governor, I want to just take a moment and frame something, and I'm not going to read your official bio, but I want to tell our friends on camera, and I'd already mentioned this to Senator Raque Adams. We actually have more folks signed up today than are typically in the rotunda. So this is a weird virtual rally, but it's a well-attended virtual rally. I want you to know that. I heard a fascinating sermon this last weekend from a guy named Levi Lusko, who's kind of this hipster preacher in Montana. You know, kind of odd. He wears torn jeans and expensive tennis shoes, but he's really a powerful speaker. He had an interesting metaphor. He claims that the best metaphor for the pandemic is not Spanish flu. Interesting. He thinks it's the Dust Bowl. For our partners, you know, the Dust Bowl is the worst man-made disaster that this nation has ever experienced. Lasted for 10 years. At one point, over 60% of African Americans in America were unemployed during that time. The Dust Bowl on top of the Depression. Over 35% of the general population struggled with food insecurity. What was also interesting that Reverend Lusko talked about was the Dust Bowl came in waves. They thought they had solved it during the first wave, and then there was a second wave. And after the second wave, we're on top of this. We're going to be able to grow crops. A third wave came. But what he talked about was the power of sort of an informal group called the Last Man Standing Clubs. The Last Man Standing Clubs established themselves across the nation. And they had a very simple message: don't give up. In fact, their logo was grab a root and growl. And they talked about that they could grab roots that they believed in, and they could growl at the Dust Bowl. They could growl at that drought and make a difference. I would be absolutely disingenuous, Governor, if I did not say thank you. Thank you for being president of Kentucky's Last Man Standing Club. And I, for one, love the fact, I just love the fact that you are grabbing roots and you are growling at this pandemic in ways that are working. There is no way that I could introduce you today without just publicly acknowledging my appreciation for your leadership during this pandemic, as well as obviously your life legacy of commitment to kids. Governor, it's an honor to have you. And I don't want to mention to you that we opened this week by airing an interview with the First Lady, and she was really good. So no pressure, but we're so appreciative that you're here today. Take it away.
Well, thank you, Terry. And you're right. The Montana preacher, the Dust Bowl, and growling at this pandemic is not in the bio, but I do appreciate it. And it's important to note that we as a people have stood up to other pandemics, to other difficult times of real challenge. And we've come out on the other side each and every time. And let me start by guaranteeing you, I will not do as well as the First Lady. And you know what? I am just fine with that. Let me also thank you and all the organizers for today's event for prioritizing everybody's health and hosting virtually. I thought it was really interesting that you mentioned you have more people watching than you did in the Rotunda. And we are seeing that in so many different areas. We are seeing in churches, there are more people watching online than come to multiple services before each week. We're seeing nonprofits that are getting more interest and more donations than ever before. So just because we're a screen apart doesn't mean we're not connected, and it doesn't mean that people aren't listening. And right now, acting maybe more with their heart and their compassion than we've seen in our lifetime. So we're in a difficult time, but we are now in the hopeful section of that difficult time. We're administering safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines faster than the federal government can supply us the doses. In fact, I just came from an opening of our first major regional vaccination center, and I can tell you, looking at that operation, I have no doubt that if we had the supply, well, we could be vaccinating more than 250,000 people every week here in this Commonwealth. It's amazing Kentuckians coming together, showing that we can do anything when we put our mind to it. And that convinces me that we're not going to stumble, but we're going to sprint out of this pandemic this year. We're going to work to get everybody vaccinated. But until then, everybody remain vigilant. Wear your mask. Continue to social distance. Those are the types of things that are going to make sure that so many important people around us are with us when this pandemic ends. And let's remember, since we're talking about kids today, that in Kentucky, more kids are being raised by their grandparents, a senior per capita, than just about anywhere else. So us doing the right thing and masking up during this pandemic protects that child and ensures that they have that adult that cares about them and follows them into adulthood. And everybody plan to get the vaccine, your shot of hope when your turn comes. So I'm honored to be speaking with you, the advocates and organizations working tirelessly on behalf of the children of Kentucky. And I've been either speaking with or working with you for so many years now. And just about a year ago, the First Lady and I joined many of you in the rally for Kentucky kids at the Capitol. And we took part in similar events while I served as Attorney General. But both as your governor and as a father of 2 kids that mean the absolute world to me, there is nothing more important to me than protecting our children and giving them all the tools to reach their full potential. And the best of times and circumstances, the work that you all do on behalf of our children is tough, it's challenging. And when we look at our state being #1 in child abuse for another straight year, and remember, the year before the pandemic, we were too. When we look at food insecurity, when we look at other issues that face our children, you've been working to address those issues for years. And then during this pandemic, your commitment to Kentucky kids has been nothing short of heroic. The entire Commonwealth owes you all a debt of gratitude, but also, importantly, we owe you more than just words of thanks. Your efforts deserve our respect and our full support. My administration's been working to help by putting the well-being of our children front and center. We know we have more work to do when 1 in 6 Kentucky households with children experience food insecurity. That's why during this pandemic, we administered PEBT benefits to more than 640,000 students. Those benefits totaled a little over $180 million to provide meals to children who depend on school meals for their daily nutrition. At the same time, we administered SNAP benefits to an average of 100,000 more individuals each month when compared to the previous year. SNAP is our first line of defense in Kentucky, and almost 70% of SNAP participants in Kentucky are families with children. So the benefits paid over the last 8 months of the year was double the amount in 2019. In all, over $1 billion of SNAP benefits were provided to families, which helped those families and their children stay healthier and safer. I also recently just donated $16,000 left over from the inaugural fund to Feeding Kentucky, a nonprofit that helps fight hunger among Kentucky's families and children, and taking some dollars from what at the time was a festive celebration, one of hope, and using it to help out in a time of need is just the right thing to do. When we think about our children, we also have to think about healthcare, which is a basic human right. And we owe an extra level of responsibility when it comes to making sure all of our children have access to quality care. Nearly 500,000 children are enrolled in Medicaid and K-CHIP. Our rate of uninsured children is 4.2%. That's below the national average of 5.6%, but it's not okay. That percentage needs to be 0. And we saw it climb over the last 4 years, but I believe this last year we have made up ground, and we are going to continue to make up grounds until every child that qualifies for K-CHIP is receiving it. And while our direction we're moving there is encouraging, and it is, with this pandemic, we've signed more families up for Medicaid, which means more children will get covered. As Terry knows, getting that last section of children signed up a couple of administrations ago only happened when we expanded Medicaid, because you got to provide it to the family to get to the hardest to reach children. And so while that's encouraging, the number of Kentucky's children with special health care needs is higher than the national average. In a recent study, it found that nearly 230,000 kids have special health care needs, which is nearly 23% of all of our children, and much higher than the national average of 19%. That's why Medicaid and K-CHIP cover a variety of service aimed at improving children's health, including child wellness checks, immunizations, behavioral health, and services delivered while our kids are in school. And this year, K-CHIP has distributed over 250,000 masks as part of the First Lady's Coverings for Kids campaign. Medicaid expansion provides coverage for adults earning up to 138% of the poverty level, with benefits and help for families large and small. Again, when we know that when parents have access to health care, they can better provide for their children. And so this program is absolutely vital to meeting the needs of our children, ensuring they can see a doctor when they're sick, because just like a child that hasn't had enough to eat can't learn and grow and prosper, a child whose medical needs aren't met can't be expected to do that either. So I'm proud to announce that we're exploring providing coverage for pregnant women in K-CHIP as well, to ensure that children who are eligible for K-CHIP when they're born are given the very best treatment by covering their mom during that period of time, and ensuring that we get the very best care as they are coming into this world. And so that'll mean that people that right now, probably in the hundreds, are not eligible, would be able to be signed up. And when we look at other needs that are out there, think about the education of our children. You look at the steps that the Lieutenant Governor and others are making, and you combine those with other healthcare programs that work directly with them, like the Dinner Table Project, which fosters resiliency and family resources that help push our kids forward. You look at the new collaborative between higher ed, K through 12, and others that's going to make sure that kids don't fall through the cracks when they're moving from elementary to middle to high school and beyond. There are so many programs that are out there that we're working on right now to better protect our children. In the end, I believe, and my faith teaches me, that all children are children of God, equal in his or her eyes, and that we all have a duty to provide the support to each one of them. We know there are children growing up in this Commonwealth that don't have real opportunity, and that's on us. I believe that we are tasked, and I believe through my faith, but you can believe through your values, with ensuring that every child has a real shot. That means helping their families like we have in this pandemic when they can't pay their rent or their utilities. That means ensuring no child is ever harmed or abused, that every child, no matter where they live, get that world-class education that moves them forward, that they are fed, that they are nurtured. And you know what? We want to make sure that every child in Kentucky is loved and has that system that's out there. Whether it's working through the foster care system, adoption, whether it's providing more help to younger parents, whether it's hiring more social workers, which I've tried to do in each of my last budgets, and we have to do it. So for all the advocates out there, we have the money to do that in this budget. We've had some of the best months in history in terms of revenues coming into the state. It's there. If we don't have more social workers in our budget, which we can afford on a going forward basis, it's on us, and we'll have failed our children. So we can do this. I believe that in our lifetime, we can take Kentucky from being one of the worst states right now to be a child based on abuse, based on poverty, based on food insecurity. and make it the very best if we are intentional. Think about what we have seen in this pandemic, the amount of compassion. And I've seen it from our kids. I've had at least 2 that have sent me their allowance to help other families. Isn't that incredible? But we've also seen so many people coming together to help children, the millions of meals delivered because kids weren't getting them in school, the volunteers that are willing to do it. And we have the will. We just got to get it done. So just like I called for in my budget in terms of relief for struggling businesses, relief for nonprofits, more social workers, let's be bold. Let's not say, well, this is a pandemic and we just can't move forward. Every year we don't move forward in helping our children is a year that we have failed them. So at this time, when we have the dollars to truly direct them towards helping our kids, let's do it. And surely we can put aside bickering. Surely we can put aside political theater. Surely we can put aside all the rest if it means helping out that next child that doesn't care whether we're a Democrat or a Republican. They just want their next meal to get healthy and to have real and true opportunity. So this should be our pledge. We work every day to create a world without child abuse, where every child gets the education that they deserve, where no child goes to bed hungry ever, where every child has access to high-speed internet, and we're working on that through our broadband initiative, and where every child in Kentucky has this amazing possible future because we've made sure that's possible for each and every one of them. Now, when you're the dad of a 10 and 11-year-old and you're a 43-year-old governor, this is personal to you. This is the world that my kids are growing up in. This is the world that their kids are eventually going to grow up in. We can do better. We must do better. And I need your help to do that because right now what we're seeing is a lot of noise, more attention on who has what powers and who can attack who than what the future looks like for our kids and for others. So let's demand from me and demand from others that we put our future first, what really matters. Because 30 years from now, people aren't going to remember a court case about the legislature versus the governor and who has what authority, but they are going to remember what we did or didn't do to invest in our children, and those children are going to look back and hold us accountable. So let's do the right things. You got my pledge that I'll focus on it each and every day. Terry, thank you for your hard work and so many other advocates that I've had the absolute honor to work with over the years. There's a better future in front of us. Let's get it done.
Thank you so much, Governor. You know, that wild radical named Dwight Eisenhower has a great quote. The search for a scapegoat is the easiest of all hunting expeditions. I so appreciate that you don't go on that hunting expedition. I so appreciate the reasonable leadership that you give us. And I have to tell you, when I watch it 4 o'clock, I see a lot of pullovers that have Andy Beshear governor. I'm kind of thinking you need one that says growler in chief. And I, for one, appreciate the thoughtfulness, but I also appreciate the growl you give when it comes to fighting this pandemic and making Kentucky the best place in America to be young.
Well, I would think about it. I think Winnie might get a little upset if I took that title from her. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. So we really appreciate all of you being here today. Apparently, Terry Brooks left out one name. So I want to make sure when we go back over those legislative awards, I take just a moment and recognize Senator Danny Carroll. Senator Carroll had worked very closely around that idea of elevating standards for child care facilities. So thank you, Senator Carroll. Didn't mean to leave that name out, but wanted to make sure that I mentioned that. What's the best way to close out on Children's Advocacy Day? It's to hear from a young person. And to close us out today, we're going to hear from Tony Clevenger from Boone County. Tony is one of the very, very effective tobacco-free ambassadors. Senator Raque Adams had mentioned all of the progress that had been made around tobacco control and vaping. Again, this concept is possible through the Foundation of Healthy Kentucky and their good efforts to protect Kentucky's kids. What I just love about what I've seen is that folks like Tony are going toe to toe with out of state pricey lobbyists for the vaping industry. And guess what? Kentucky's kids are beating them. They're winning on issue after issue. So Tony, I appreciate the fact that you are brave to tackle that and you're smart in how you do it. Welcome. And I am so appreciative that you're going to sort of close us out for this 2021 Children's Advocacy Week rally. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tony Clevenger of Boone County, Kentucky, and I attend Cooper High School in Union. And I am so excited and grateful to speak to you all. First, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and how I discovered I can be an advocate as a young person. Most prominently, at the end of last school year, I was elected to be the student representative on the Boone County School Board. This position not only heads the Superintendent Student Advisory Council, which is a group of young leaders from all schools in our county that focus on student voice, diversity, and service, but I also hold a seat on the school board. Here, I'm able to report on the progress of the Superintendent Student Advisory Council, provide feedback on things the board is voting on, and also present differing opinions among my peers. This position has allowed me to develop my voice within my community and realize how large of an impact young people can have. Furthermore, I am a tobacco-free youth ambassador for Kentucky's Smoke-Free Coalition. Being a part of this association allows for me, as a young person, to advocate for tobacco-free state and local policies that actually impact me. This year, the policy that we are focusing on, that you may have seen in the Blueprint for Kentucky's Children, is to allow city and county governments the option to regulate the use, display, sale, and distribution of tobacco products, including e-cigarettes, to curb tobacco use among youth. Currently, local governments cannot make the regulations any stricter than they are at the state level, which does not allow them to address worsening situations within their area. The tobacco-free youth ambassadors realize this is a big problem that must be addressed. Here again, the youth of Kentucky can transform our state into a healthier and stronger version of itself. But I have spoken for far too long without thanking Governor Beshear and the other state leaders that spoke today. As a young person, it is truly inspiring to witness the leaders of our Commonwealth so invested in youth advocacy. Thank you for taking the time out of your unimaginably busy schedules to support the young people of Kentucky. However, these state leaders cannot do this by themselves. They need young advocates to step up to the plate. Being an advocate right now is so incredibly important so that we as a state can give children the best possible opportunities for a brighter future and make Kentucky the best place in America to be young. It is not hard to be an advocate. Some things you can do today include learning more about the Blueprint for Kentucky's Children policy priorities and reaching out to your legislators about these priorities. But young people here today, I would like to specifically emphasize that you can be an advocate for yourself and your peers too. You know how it feels to be a young person right now, which is why it is so important that your voice is heard. Speaking right now, I am an advocate. And if Felicity and I can be advocates, you can too. In closing, I would like to thank the Blueprint partners and again emphasize that you take a look at the Blueprint of policy priorities, as well as remind you all that today is only Tuesday of Children's Advocacy Week. If you're still wondering how you can be an advocate, please consider participating in other events these week. They are great opportunities. Being an advocate is not hard, but it is empowering. Now let's get to work. Thank you.
If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands, clap your hands, clap, 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 clap. Come on, everybody, let's do it together. Even you, Daddy. Even you, Mommy.
Okay.
If you're happy and you know it, stomp your feet. If you're happy and stomp your feet. If you're happy and stomp your feet, stomp your feet. Bam, bam!
Hi, I'm Susan Pulley from Fulton Independent Schools. I would like to thank the state legislators for advocating for all the children in Kentucky.